Every year, sexual harassment impacts thousands of individuals. Without proper education and prevention, sexual harassment in the workplace impacts victims and can cost companies hundreds of millions of dollars every year. Being sexually harassed results in a host of repercussions, and the work environment is no longer conducive to a positive atmosphere. It instead becomes an unhealthy environment and overall a place to avoid. But what technically is sexual harassment? The United States Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, or EEOC, defines sexual harassment as unwanted sexual advances, requests for sexual favors, verbal or physical conduct of a sexual nature, harassment based on gender or sexual preference, or showing favoritism based on sex. The EEOC has also enacted several laws throughout the decades to legally protect workers from discrimination, such as sexual harassment. One of the most relevant to sexual harassment being Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. It's important to know your rights as an employee, so you can both recognize and legally protect yourself from sexual harassment. We're going to identify a few different scenarios of sexual harassment and the best way to respond to sexual harassment in general. Just a forewarning, this topic may be uncomfortable for those who have been a victim to sexual harassment in the past. Sexual harassment isn't always just touching with or without sexual intent. More often than not, it comes in subtler but equally uncomfortable forms. Staring, stalking, degradation, and exclusion are all considered forms of sexual harassment. Both aggressive and subtler forms of sexual harassment make the victim feel threatened, angry, and scared. It is the duty of the company to ensure that consequential action is taken with every case of sexual harassment. Here, we see a female employee who is followed on a daily basis to the water fountain. Instead of a random pattern of run-ins, the perpetrator of the harassment has made it his goal to follow his victim on her daily trip to get a drink. Its silent pattern creates an atmosphere of dread for the victim as she wonders when he's going to escalate the behavior. These types of situations can be just as traumatizing as more overt forms of harassment. Inappropriate jokes, suggestive comments, aggressive glances and smirking, implicit messaging, texts, and emails can make a victim feel equally as uncomfortable as physical touching. In fact, sexual harassment often comes in more subtle forms. Comments about someone's appearance or an overheard private conversation may seem innocent, but can easily be misread as sexual harassment. In situations where a worker has become romantically interested in a coworker, it's important that both parties remain completely neutral and professional in the workplace. If one decides to ask out the other, it should be done outside of the workplace. And no matter what, all parties should continue to remain professional while in the workplace. If the person asks out the other person repeatedly, this is what crosses the line into sexual harassment. Quid pro quo is a term used to describe sexual harassment scenarios that involve upper management and their subordinates. It's known as the "you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours" form of sexual harassment. Managers, senior staff, and other people in position of power in a workplace must be diligent to prevent any situation where this could possibly be construed. If a subordinate comes forward with a proposal, it should be met with a professional, managerial critique that acts in the best interests of the workplace. What makes this form of harassment so frightening is the implied threat that if the victim does not agree to the terms, their job may be in danger. This form of harassment is often unreported for this exact reason. In reality, reporting and stopping the behavior is the best way to protect your position and keep the harassment from continuing. Favoritism, exclusion, and unequal treatment, while often seen as bullying, are all considered sexual harassment if it involves a clear gender-related disparity. It is also considered sexual harassment if it involves excluding people of a certain sexual orientation. Both of these are against the law and are subject to legal action if this occurs in the workplace. Regardless of a person's individual beliefs, the workplace is not the place to treat someone different with disgust or discrimination. In most workplaces, it's common that coworkers share and distribute jokes, photos, memes, and videos through email and messaging to share in a common laugh. This is healthy, as it can help maintain high morale, can make coworkers feel more connected with each other, and are overall the signs of a fun, connected, and often productive team. This becomes a negative thing, however, when it becomes sexual harassment. It doesn't take much time for a coworker to go too far and share or distribute something to someone that may be misconstrued as sexual harassment. It's hard to know exactly what will offend someone, and we often gauge personality types and the nature of our relationships with coworkers as a way to determine what they'll find amusing. But all it takes is for one person to receive the wrong joke or see something over someone's shoulder for it to turn into sexual harassment. It's best practice to keep the jokes, videos, memes, etc. as far away from sexual harassment as possible. The first step in reacting to a sexual harassment situation is for the victim to make clear to the offender that their actions are inappropriate and unwelcomed. In some cases, the harasser may not have known that their behavior constitutes sexual harassment. In other cases, when the harassment is deliberate, speaking out stops them from escalating the behavior. Oftentimes, the harasser will test the limits of a victim, becoming more aggressive and hostile in their approach over time. Speaking up at the first sign of sexual harassment shows them that the behavior is inappropriate and will not be tolerated. The second step when faced with sexual harassment is to document any instances as they occur. Anything you can record about the instances or instance of sexual harassment to show upper management can help them be more aware of it and take appropriate action. Which leads us to the next step, and most important step to take when reacting to sexual harassment: speaking to your manager or your human resources representative. Their job is to ensure a healthy, safe working environment, which all workers have a legal right to have. Without speaking to them about the issue, oftentimes they are powerless to stop the behavior. All reports to them are required to be kept as confidential as possible, and they will interview any witnesses and the harasser separately and are expected to discipline the harasser as necessary. This often includes written warnings, suspensions, demotion, or termination depending on the severity of the harassment. The most important thing to remember is that it is illegal for a company or individual to retaliate or enact any payback for reporting sexual harassment. Doing so will result in termination and possible legal ramifications. The reality of the situation is that sexual harassment is an uncomfortable and difficult subject for many people, but it's a far too common occurrence in the workplace, and it warrants a discussion. But society's expectations are changing. And fortunately, we're moving towards a time that has much less tolerance for sexual harassment. At the end of the day, every worker just wants to be able to do their job in peace without fearing for their safety or without enduring the discomfort that comes from sexual harassment. Every worker has the power within them to contribute to a safe, healthy, fun, and comfortable work environment that ultimately we all have a right to.